Marisol Vega had learned long ago that the Harold Washington Library had moods. The front doors sighed in winter and snapped in July. The elevators grumbled about mechanical injustice. And every night, once the last patron had drifted out and the security guard began whistling, Marisol could swear the stacks exhaled, just like a tired reader closing a final chapter. 27 years of evening shifts had tuned her ear to the building's secret language. Still, nothing prepared her for the first time she heard the book drop growl. It happened on a Tuesday in early March, the kind of wet Chicago night that soaked shoes and ambitions alike. Marisol was peering into the slot to fish out a rare volume of Sandberg essays when a vibration trembled up the chute, a deep rolling sound like a bass note struck underwater. The book in her hand quivered. A sudden wind, impossible indoors, ruffled her bangs. She chalked it up to faulty HVAC until the next morning, when two street sweepers reported seeing an enormous cloaked man with glowy eyes stride down State Street before dawn, scattering pigeons and commuters. The police dismissed it, but Marisol felt an anxious flutter. At noon she discovered an unscanned copy of The Dark Gentleman, a 1930s penny dreadful about a vengeful warlock, wedged in the metal mouth of the return. It was a week overdue. Its barcode was missing from the system, as though it had never belonged to the collection. That night she read the novel in one breathless sitting. The villain, a necromantic aristocrat named Lord Nightfall, had those very glowy eyes. He murdered villagers with a silver-etched staff and boasted of stepping between worlds through cracks of negligence. The final sentence leapt out at her. When the debt is unpaid, the dead will be collected. She closed the book, fingers shaking. The library rumbled again. Marisol's rational mind sprang to work. Correlation was not causation, she told herself. She dug through circulation logs. The novel had last been officially checked out in 1987 by a patron whose address now hosted a wireless store. The fine listed was $13.05. She tried to dismiss the chill lacing her spine, convinced someone was playing an elaborate prank. Until Thursday, when a T-Rex the color of rust was spotted lumbering beneath the L, its tail flattening parked bikes, its roar echoed by a collective scream. Twitter trended Dickerskallen Jurassic Loop for an hour before all footage vanished from phones. Marisol, sweating in the staff room, held the culprit. Lost Horizons, a children's adventure featuring a time-traveling paleontologist. 4 months overdue. She called in sick, but she didn't go home. Instead, she hovered beside the book drop, armed with coffee and a notepad, determined to watch the shoot all night. The rest of Chicago slept uneasily, but in the basement, fluorescent lights hummed and dust danced across the metal cart. At 1:14 a.m., the slotted mouth yawned, emitting a rumble and the smell of ozone. One volume slid through, The Stars Beyond, a 1960 gold foil paperback about an AI fleet commander bent on conquering Earth. Its due date sticker spared no mercy. 3 years past return. Behind the chute, deep in the library's guts, something clanked, like armored footsteps beginning to pace. Marisol fled to the break room and rummaged for answers. The pattern was ironclad. Each overdue book had manifested its antagonist in the city. Books returned on time caused no havoc. Overdues created holes. The cracks of negligence, she thought grimly. Somewhere between ignorance and apathy, fiction was bleeding into Michigan Avenue. The next morning she requested a meeting with Dr. Paxton, the library's director, a precise woman who organized her pencils by hex codes. Marisol explained everything, the growling chute, the sightings, the books. Paxton pinched the bridge of her nose. "Are you suggesting," she asked delicately, "that we are under attack by tardy literature?" Marisol produced her evidence. Dog-eared paperbacks, grainy security footage, a spreadsheet of anomalies. Paxton studied it for 5 long minutes. Then, to Marisol's shock, she locked the office door. "I wondered how long it would take you," Paxton murmured. She opened a bottom drawer and withdrew a leather-bound folio engraved with an owl wrapped in chains. Inside lay decades of incident reports. Phantom pirates in 72, a cyborg samurai in 94, a swarm of Lovecraftian eels in 2010. The folio was titled The Lateness Ledger. "It's the library's oldest secret," Paxton said. "Overdue books create debt, and debt is hunger. Character energy, the strongest part of a story, slips through the return slot, seeking payment. Why haven't we sealed the chute? We did, twice. It reappeared elsewhere each time. The mechanism isn't physical, it's narrative. The only remedy is to square the account." Paxton tapped the folder. "Villains manifest because conflict is their function. If the book is returned and the fine paid, they dissolve." Marisol envisioned Lord Nightfall, the rogue T-Rex, the AI fleet commander, all striding through snow-slicked city streets. "We need the patrons," she realized. "We have to track every overdue copy before Chicago becomes a crossover apocalypse." Paxton granted her temporary authority, a modest budget, and the run of special collections. "Recruit who you must," she said, handing Marisol a silver stamp embossed "Do No More." "And hurry." Marisol turned first to Darren Wu, a grad student who shelved fantasy and could recite Dewey Decimals like rap lyrics. Next, she conscripted Ramona Kelly, a retired detective who volunteered in genealogy. They formed a cramped war room in an unused auditorium, maps sprawled over tables, pins marking each siding: Pilsen for the Warlock, River North for the Dinosaur, Uptown for the rogue starship that briefly hovered like a dark halo before vanishing into low cloud cover. Darren hacked the circulation servers to produce a list of every overdue item in the last year. 48,000 and change. "We'll never finish," he groaned. Marisol rubbed her temples. "We triage, identify the books most likely to breed catastrophic villains." Darren wrote code to flag keywords: war, monster, apocalypse, murder, dragon, robot. The list slimmed to 200, manageable, if barely. Ramona phoned patrons with the steely calm of someone once tasked with delivering next of kin notices. "Good evening, ma'am. Your copy of Slasher Camp's Seventh is overdue. City safety depends on its prompt return." 73 people complied out of terror or confusion. 30 mailed checks for fines. With every scan of a barcode, Marisol swore she felt the building breathe easier. But Lord Nightfall remained at large, stalking subterranean tunnels. The AI commander, styling himself Fleet Overlord Pelion, hijacked the digital billboards on Wacker Drive to demand surrender. Police helicopters were swatted from the sky by invisible force fields. The city teetered on panic. Worse, 3 new villains surfaced: Ma Barker from True Crime Titans, a cyber witch from Pixel Hex, and, bewilderingly, an angry goose the size of a CTA bus from Very Silly Animals A to Z. The return slot, battered by constant use, moaned after each arrival as if choking on worlds. Darren, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m., brought pizza and bad news. Most of the worst books were never checked out. They were stolen. No patron to punish means no fine, no closure. "So the debt can't be paid," Marisol whispered. "Then we change the story." She remembered a line from her grandmother, a barrio poet who repaired folktales like broken toys. "A story is a street. You can redirect traffic." Marisol proposed a gamble. If the villains emerged by narrative law, perhaps heroes could do the same. The library still owned on-time copies of their source texts. She could open the slot intentionally, summon counterforces, and pit fiction against fiction, genre versus genre, until each overdue book found its rightful end. Paxton gave curt approval. "But if you fail," she said, "the library becomes epicenter of chaos." Marisol glanced at the marble lions guarding the entrance. "Then we make sure the finale happens on our turf, not the city's." Saturday evening, they evacuated the building under the guise of an electrical malfunction. Only 4 remained inside: Marisol, Darren, Ramona, and Paxton. They wheeled carts of carefully chosen books toward the basement. Everything about the plan felt like balancing porcelain on a twister. Marisol fed the first volume into the slot. The Solar Crusaders, a pulp starring Captain Dorius Helix, enemy of tyrant AIs. The chute glowed blue. Thunder cracked indoors. A ringing silence followed. From the stack strode a broad-shouldered man in brass armor, cosmic insignia blazing across his chest. He bowed. "Where is Pelion?" "Above," Marisol said, pointing at the ceiling. "But first, we need your oath to protect civilians." "By the Nebula Code," Helix swore. Next went Blood and Ivy, an urban fantasy with a lesbian witch detective named Sorrel Drake, who specialized in necromancer takedowns. Sparks flickered, green mist condensed into a figure with vine-tattooed arms and a glaring wand. Sorrel tested gravity with a hop, grinned and clicked her tongue. "Let's hunt that overcooked aristocrat." They continued. Detective Victor Black from Windy City Noir to counter Ma Barker, Sir Percival the Radiant from the Dragon's Court to tackle the Cyber Witch, and, perhaps foolishly, Greg the kind-hearted Gosling from Very Silly Animals. Greg emerged 10 feet tall, his plush white feathers bristling. He honked valiantly. 5 heroes against 5 villains. Darren christened their assemblage the Genre 5, forbidden from tweeting about it under penalty of narrative collapse. They relocated to the lobby, transforming desks into barricades, rolling globes into vantage points. Paxton installed motion sensors. Darren jury-rigged the PA system to broadcast instructions citywide in case bystanders wandered too close. Marisol placed the Overdue books themselves on a long oak table like bait. At 11:57 p.m., the skylight imploded. Fleet Overlord Pelion descended in a corona of violet energy, metal cloak billowing over marble floors. He scanned the heroes with infrared eyes. "Irrelevant protagonists," he intoned. "Submit books or be reformatted." Captain Helix leveled his photonic lance. "Your chapter ends tonight." At that exact pulse of a heartbeat, both front doors cracked outward. Lord Nightfall glided through in swirling midnight robes, staff aloft. Shadows coiled behind him, the Cyber Witch flickering with pixelated flames, Ma Barker clutching a Tommy gun, and the colossal villainous Goose, eyes mad with hiss. Fiction had come home to roost. The confrontation felt eerily theatrical, like a cosmic librarian had arranged the pieces. Marisol, crouched behind the main desk, pressed record on her phone. Some part of her future self would require proof. Pelion fired plasma bolts. Helix deflected with his shield, scorching pillars. Sir Percival vaulted a poetry display and swung his dragonbone sword at the Goose's ankles. Feathers exploded like snow. Greg honked in solidarity and tackled the bird, wings flapping with improbable velocity. Sorrel Drake faced Lord Nightfall and the Cyber Witch. Vine spells lashed, intercepting necrotic beams. The air smelled of lilacs and brimstone. Overhead sprinklers sputtered on, adding rain to the melee. Yet for every heroic advance, the villains rallied. Buoyed, Marisol realized, by the unpaid fines stacked on her oak table. The debt was still open. No amount of swordplay could erase a ledger. "Darren!" she yelled over ricocheting energy. "Get the register!" He sprinted like a man possessed, sliding beneath laser fire to the finance computer. Ramona guarded him with Detective Black's revolver. Courtesy of literature's finest contrivance, it fired metaphysical bullets that shredded pixel shields and ghostly armor alike. The problem? They didn't know the amounts owed. Some records, like The Dark Gentleman, were pre-digital. Transferring partial payments wouldn't satisfy the system. They needed a symbolic settlement big enough to close every story at once. Paxton strode into crossfire, her suede heels ruined. She was carrying a glass donation box that had sat in the lobby for decades, filled with spare change tourists tossed in on tours. "Public funds," she said, setting it beside Marisol. $53,412.26. Marisol blinked. "Seriously?" "People underestimate pennies," Paxton replied. Lightning cracked the skylight again. A gust of night air whipped papers everywhere. Lord Nightfall chanted a killing verse, drawing power from each shadowy corner. The library's lights stuttered. Marisol made a decision. She seized the rubber mallet used for children's story time and shattered the donation box. Coins and bills poured across the wet floor with a triumphant metallic roar. She grabbed the DUE No More stamp and slammed it onto an empty receipt roll, ink splattering. Then she declared, loud as the PA would carry, "Harold Washington Library hereby pays, in full and with interest, every debt owed to its stories." She and Paxton shoveled coins into the return slot, receipts fluttering after them like desperate doves, each clink punctuated by the stamp's rhythmic thud. The effect was instantaneous. A wind howled up the chute, pages rifled across the entire building, and a low chime rang. A checkout beep magnified 1,000-fold. Pelion froze mid-attack, eyes flickering. Nightfall's staff sputtered, its runes dimming. Ma Barker's Tommy gun melted into paper pulp. The cyber witch pixelated, frantically grasping at her dissolving code. The monstrous goose shrank by degrees, confusion crossing its avian face until it was no bigger than a real Canada goose, who promptly waddled under a desk. One by one, villains crumbled into swirling letters that spiraled toward the slot like iron filings drawn by a magnet. Each letter slapped into its book with a satisfying snap, ink liquefying and soaking back into pages. When the wind settled, every Overdue volume lay inert upon the oak table, covers warm but powerless. Captain Helix saluted, scarred armor gleaming under emergency lights. Debt settled, reality secure. He looked wistfully at Sorrel, who shrugged back at him. "Will we remember this?" he asked Marisol. "Only as long as our circulation policy allows," she answered, throat tight. The heroes lined up by the chute like travelers at a gate. Helix stepped through first, vanishing with a starburst. Sir Percival bowed, doffing an imaginary hat. Sorrel Drake winked at Ramona and flickered away. Detective Black tilted his fedora in grayscale farewell. Greg the kind-hearted gosling, last of all, left a single white feather on the floor before ambling into silver light. Silence fell. Broken glass crunched as Paxton exhaled the night's terrors. Sprinklers clicked off. Somewhere a clock chimed 4 a.m. "Is it over?" Darren asked, voice raw. Marisol gathered the villain's books, now stamped, filed, and surprisingly unremarkable. "For now," she said, "but the system still works. People will still return things late." Paxton surveyed the soaked lobby. "Then we refine protocols, automatic renewal emails, text reminders, and maybe fewer donation boxes." She smiled wryly. "You saved Chicago with pocket change, Miss Vega." Ramona began sweeping feathers. Darren collapsed into an armchair, triumphant and dead tired. A fragment of dawn leaked through the broken skylight, painting the damaged gold. Marisol hugged the bundle of books to her chest. They were ordinary paper once more, light as possibilities. She thought of every reader who had ever lost a volume under a couch or in the back seat of a cab, unaware they had flirted with disaster. She also thought of Captain Helix's resolve, Sorrel's defiance, Greg's earnest honk, all born from words, all willing to defend the world that dared to imagine them. "Stories," she said softly. "Take care of us if we take care of them." Paxton touched her shoulder. "Come upstairs. We'll write incident reports until sunrise." They climbed the darkened escalators together, the library around them quiet, licking its wounds, already rehearsing tomorrow's sentences. Outside, the city stirred. Horns, gulls, the rhythmic rattle of trains, blissfully unaware that overnight, its fate had hinged on returning a few overdue books. At the top landing, Marisol paused, struck by a sudden thought. "You know," she murmured, "we never paid the fine on the Dark Gentleman specifically." Paxton froze. "The bulk payment should cover all—" Thump. They looked down. The return slot, 5 flights below, rattled. A singular, ominous thunk echoed up the atrium, as if a hardback of significant malevolence had just dropped through. Marisol closed her eyes, then grinned. She cracked her knuckles, turned on her heel, and started back down the stairs. "That," she said, "sounds overdue."